some good terms that we are wanting to speak clearly here today that we believe will take you leading edge creators further into clarity about deliberate creation. You have beliefs that are only thoughts that you keep thinking. That's all a belief is. It's just a practiced thought. And it's so well practiced, it's sort of like the route that you drive to work. You sort of always go the same way, even though there are endless choices. Jerry and Esther have a global positioning satellite attached to their vehicles, and it doesn't matter how many wrong turns they take, because Jerry is always wanting to test Magellan. He will say, she wants to go, it's a woman's voice, she wants to go this way, but I think we should go this way. And so Esther will say, Magellan, Jerry, who should I follow? So she goes the way Jerry wants her to go, and Magellan will say, make a U-turn for a while, and then she finally gives in and says, all right, if you want to go this way that I would not have chosen, now I will redirect you from where you now are. And so she will say, I've found you. She doesn't actually say that, but her needle points in that direction, and then she begins to speak again. She does not make them go back to their point of diversion. She regroups from wherever they now are and makes a new plan. And that's the way we want you to begin to think about your beliefs. You can make a new plan because there are many, many ways to where you are wanting to go. And sometimes the route that you have defined as the best route isn't. And you can tell, and only you can tell, as you compare where you are to where you have decided for now that you want to be. And it's a never-ending changing process. In other words, you get to change. Source energy will assist you as often as you like. There is no end. There are many more than 3 wishes. There is no end to the universe's ability or willingness to yield to you that which you are asking for. So, as we see you standing in your now, we can feel within you vibrational patterns that could be called beliefs. We would like to soften that by just calling them dominant thoughts. And we want to help you to realize that the reason that they are dominant thoughts is only because you've practiced them. You've made them dominant. And they're not dominant because you've practiced them for a long, long time and all those years add up to something like a big bucket of heavy thoughts. In other words, it's not like that. You are an in this moment transmitting and receiving mechanism. And so the only thing that we're talking about when we talk about dominant thoughts or beliefs is your propensity to think that way. You get that? In other words, it's not that there's this big bucket of thoughts that now you've got to change one at a time or get rid of. It is that you have this habit of thought, this propensity to think this way, that you can change much more easily than you currently believe. So, for example, when you think about the subject of dollars, does the subject of dollars or financial abundance, does it feel to you like freedom and excitement and anticipation of that which is to come? Or does the subject of dollars feel to you like worry or struggle, uneasiness? You can tell. In other words, sometimes people will say, well, it's a little bit of all of that. And we say, but you can tell which of those is most frequent. You can tell which of those choices is the dominant thought. When you think about your predominant relationship, does it feel like fun and fancy and freedom and joy, expansion? Or does it feel like hard work and struggle? You know, there isn't anyone who cannot answer that question easily. When you think about your physical body, does it feel hardy or tentative? Does it feel good feeling, flexible, free? Or does it feel a bit bound, worrisome? You can tell. Now we know there are some mixtures, but we want you to just for a little bit focus upon which is dominant, because when you understand which is dominant, all that means is that's the likelihood of the route you're going to take. So if something in your now, contrast, helps you to conclude a desire about your body or about your dollars or about your relationship or about anything, and as those desires are born, it activates right away whatever vibration you've practiced most. It's like picking up a stick that could vibrate on either end, and whichever end you've been practicing the most begins to vibrate. So what we are suggesting to you is that sometimes as you introduce to yourself a new desire, the belief that you've practiced doesn't harmonize with it. And that's when you begin to feel that negative emotion. That's when you begin to feel doubt or fear or uneasiness. In other words, that's your indicator that you are not in alignment with your own desire. That's a powerful statement, alignment with your own desire, because when you line up with you, all things are a go. In other words, when you line up with you, that is so important to understand. The only thing that you need to do is line up with you. You don't have to line up with anything else. You don't have to get the world to agree with you. You don't have to understand what the world understands. You just must be in alignment with you, because universal forces are yielding to you your desire, and as long as you are a match to your desire, then there is no resistance, and there is easy manifestation or physical compliance with the idea that you have set forth. So it is a lovely thing when you begin to consciously be aware of what your dominant vibration is. Now, when we talk about a dominant vibration, the other word that we want to exaggerate and emphasize here today is activate. Because, as we said earlier, you don't have this bucket of beliefs that you need to deal with. You have these potential thoughts that could be activated. And a dominant belief is just one that you activate frequently. In other words, you might even call it easily activated because you've practiced it so much. So, when you think about your radio, and there's something that you want to listen to on 101 FM, you wouldn't say to your friend, well, I think I'm going to set it on 98.6 and see what happens. You would set it on the frequency that matched the signal that you were wanting to receive. Same thing with your beliefs and desires. If you have a desire set on 101 FM and your belief is set on 98.6, there is some resistance within you that's not going to give you the manifestation that you want. Are you getting a sense of how it works? So, I want to help you today to realize what beliefs are most activated within you. And we want to help you to realize that you have so much choice in what's activated, but you have to make the choice. And that's the thing that we see with so many of our physical friends. They don't make the choice. Whatever has been activated just sort of stays activated. It's like, well, I believed this before, so I guess I should believe it now. Or, I thought this way before, and I haven't thought about thinking about it differently, so I guess I'll just keep thinking about it this way. And we say, some of the things that you think don't serve you, like physical decline, like shortage or lack of things, like it's just the way I am, or it's just the way things are. In other words, there are many thoughts that you've picked up along your physical trail that are truthful thoughts, because there are many who think them often enough to manifest them, and so then the statisticians record the data and they say this is a truth. But we say it's only a truth because people have been thinking them. People have been activating them. You can make any truth you choose your truth. Sometimes we will hear you say, well, there is this truthful thought of the way I am. In other words, my body's not working very well these days, and I don't have as much money as I want, and my relationship stinks. And sure, I have these desires, but this is just the way it is. And we say, we want you to begin to think about how you want it to be rather than think about how it is. And you say, oh, well, that would be fantasy. That would be lies. That would be making it up. And we say, we're not asking you to make the choice between truth and lies. Well, maybe we are. What we're asking you to make the choice between is what feels good and what doesn't feel good. But there's something in the human makeup that says, but shouldn't I choose what is true first? And it's fortunate if it's true and does feel good, but shouldn't I choose what is true? Shouldn't I be true to truth? And we say, be true to who you really are. When you are true to who you really are, you always choose the thought that feels best. So if you are choosing the thought that feels best and you are doing it regularly, then the thought that feels best becomes your truth. It becomes the most active thought within you. It becomes the thought that universal forces activate around. In other words, there's no reason that what feels best can't be your truth. There's no reason that you cannot truly be prosperous and truly be stable in your body and truly be vital and alive and clear-minded. There is no reason other than you have practiced other thoughts. And you say, well, I didn't do it on my own. A whole lot of them are practicing those thoughts. And we say, we know they are. We know they're practicing those thoughts. That's what convinced you that it's a thought worth thinking. But if it doesn't feel good, it's not a thought worth thinking. If it doesn't feel good, you're not being true to who you are. If it doesn't feel good, you've got your tuner set to the wrong station, and you're beaming in something from a mortal level instead of something from a spiritual level. In other words, you are not tuned in, tapped in, turned on to who you are when you feel bad, and we don't care who calls it truth. There are a lot of truths you don't want. Cancer is one. AIDS is another. Terrorism is another. Violence is another. In other words, there are all kinds of miserable true things. And what we're wanting to harass you into is saying, as Esther said to us after a discussion like this with her, I can damn well choose the vibration that is dominant. We said, could be more positive, but that's a good start. It's wonderful to make a decision. It is wonderful to say, I'm going to choose. Never mind what happened when I was 4 or 5 or 8 or 12 or 20 or 40 or 50. Never mind what happened. And never mind how it set me to thinking. The only thing that matters now is what I'm thinking a vibrational match to who I really am? Am I vibrationally compliant with the source that is me? So nothing is more important than that I feel good. Nothing is more important than that I feel good. Nothing matters more than that I practice thoughts that feel good. So toward that never end, we are offering a new game or process that we are calling virtual reality. You've played games like it as you've done creative visualizations or creative workshops, but this game is different, and we're going to talk about why it's different, because if you don't get why it's different, then it won't work for you. Here's the game. Last 30 seconds, you're in charge of all of it. You're like a movie director. You choose the scene. You choose the time of year. In other words, where is it? What time of year is it? What time of day is it? What does the air feel like? You give it as much description as you could, as much description as the movie makers give you when they open a movie and play that music. In other words, you get to choose all of that. And then once you've established where you are and what it looks like and how you feel, you can decide whether somebody else is there with you. It doesn't matter if they are. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not helpful. And then you decide what their mood is, and then you exchange a few words and you get out. The process is get in, feel good, get out. We were visiting with a woman recently who said, I'm in my backyard. And we said, you have endless choices, but the backyard is a fine choice. And we said, what time of day is it? What does it look like? And she began a very clear description. And then she began talking about how this flower was about to bloom. And this flower had already bloomed and was waning. And we said, this is your virtual reality. You can make them all bloom at once if you want. In other words, that's the thing about virtual reality. It's not about facing reality. It's about activating a vibration within you on purpose. Virtual reality is where you practice a vibration and make it dominant. Can you see value in that? In other words, if something happened when you were 2 and became a dominant vibration for that day, and then you and your family talked about it so that it was a dominant vibration for that week, and then you kept remembering it, and then you repeated it to friends, and then you began attracting other people who had similar experiences, so ever since you were 2, that was a dominant vibration, don't you think it could be of value to get into a virtual reality and practice some other vibration to make it dominant? In other words, you're not stuck with what got started back who knows when. You get to choose, and over a very short period of time, you can make any vibration of your choice a dominant vibration just with a little bit of practice. So, virtual reality is not a place where you go to fix something. In other words, you would not create a beautiful house and notice that the roof was leaking and then bring in a repairman. He tracks up your rug, overcharges you, you wrestle him to the ground, make him make it right, and you triumphantly win with your struggle justifying your existence. When you go to your virtual reality, you get to make everything exactly the way you want to make it. The only thing that virtual reality is used for, as far as we are encouraging, is a place that you go to feel good and practice feeling good in 30-second snatches until you begin to activate within yourself vibrations like that. In other words, this is the way you begin to offer your vibration purposefully. We were visiting with a friend who took us to Hawaii. We were on the beach, lovely time of day, nice and warm. She was dressed in her beach clothes. Her feet were bare and in the sand. It was a beautiful vista. beach activities going on all around her. Barbecue smell of food, people playing in the surf, music playing off in the distance. Perfect time and place. And then we said, who else is there? And she said, my son. At which point, her virtual reality went south.